blown up 3 times on Okinawa. We were under artillery fire, mortar fire, and sniper shots. But when I was young, I had no idea what war was like. My name is James G. for Greer Connor Jr. I was very fortunate as a child to be living in Kansas City, Kansas. My dad was an aircraft engineer, so I was out at the airport a lot, and I flew in the old tri-motor airplanes out there. Then we moved back to Reading, Pennsylvania. A friend of mine, we went to school together, James Oshesky. He and I played baseball together, and that Sunday, we were down at the Penn Street Bridge, and to the right of it was a little field. He and I were hitting fungos to each other. I'd hit the ball to him, he'd catch it, then he'd come in and hit. I'd go out and he'd hit to me. And when we finished, we went home, and that's when we learned that Pearl Harbor was hit. So I said to my mother, I'm going up to the Reading Eagle and get some newspapers and sell them. And that's what I did. I was selling extras. That's when I learned about the Pearl Harbor. When I was 17, I went to Paris Island, and from there I went to New River and took special training, combat intelligence. That was a real good course, and it was with me all the time I was in the service. On the bow of the LST, it was full of tanks on the deck, and looking into the beautiful night. That was a lovely trip. But boy, the hell sure hit a couple days later when you had to go in under battleships, cruisers. Then you had the rocket ships in too, and the fire rockets. When I was young, I had no idea what war was like. My first combat mission was Peleliu in the Palau Islands. I carried a satchel with maps in it. I carried a most huge pair of field glasses, binoculars I've ever seen in my life. I had my Thompson in my arms, had 2 grenades on my chest. They took you right up on the beach. We jumped off the side. There was shelling all around us and bullets going all over our heads, you know. And we were flat on our gut, staying down and moving forward very slowly. You never know when you're going to get hit. And when I was leaving the ship, there was a young man, bare-chested, with a .50 caliber machine gun, and he was firing into the island. I got out with the other guys, and I laid on the beach for a while and moved up, and I heard a terrific explosion. And I looked back, and I saw this .50 caliber machine gun come down. Wherever that young man was never made it, of course. I was attached to Easy Company, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, and we saw an awful lot of new recruits coming in because we were losing an awful lot of men.
Was the airfield on Peleliu. To seize that airstrip, the exhausted Marines pushed on in a determined effort to gain that prize before nightfall. By the late afternoon, the Marines had possession of part of that objective.
So we went inland, and we got near the airport. We were on the outskirts of the airport, and we were resting there. The next thing you know, wham, I got hit by a nearby shell. Picked me up and threw me a couple feet away. That's all I remember until a corpsman came along and had cut my jacket and cut my trousers and put 2 huge bandages on my back. I'm still carrying a piece of metal in my shoulder and a piece of metal in my right buttock. I was out of it, but I woke up when getting bandaged, and then I got on the stretcher with 4 guys carrying me. Next thing you know, I was on the ground. They ran. They yelled, "Tank attack." I couldn't move before, right? You'd be surprised how you can move. I got up on my 2 feet, and I looked around to see where I could go, and I saw this road, sort of a road. I got on that and started walking. I had no idea where I was going. There was a swamp area to the left and hills to the right. I walked for quite a while, I guess, and I heard this voice say, "Stretcher bearers, corpsmen." They came and picked me up, another shot in my arm, and took me out of the beach. And that's when I got on the hospital ship. And they left me laying there. They didn't operate on me. They said, "He's all right." But the only thing I remember about the Australian hospital ship is we had mutton for breakfast and mutton for lunch and mutton for dinner. From there we went to Ulithi and got off there, went to the hospital there for a couple of days. I was walking around by that time. Put us on airplanes, C-47s, hospital planes, and we're going to take us back to Guadalcanal. So we took off, and while we're up in the air, the nurse came over and said to us, "We just got word that the Japanese were going to shoot down these hospital planes." And I thought, what a hell of a way to go. But it never happened. So we landed in Guadalcanal, stayed there for a day or two, then went back to our original island where we started our training. Pavuvu it was called, in the Russell Islands. And there we trained for the Okinawan campaign. Of course, we didn't know then that's where we were going. We had the great honor of seeing Bob Hope fly over in a little airplane and his buddy waving to us and yelling to us. And he put on a wonderful show for us. And then from there, we trained and trained. Then we got the word, since I was in combat intelligence, I was in headquarters company, and we had our own group of people. We were training all the time, map reading, map making, weaponry and all that stuff. On the way in, we hit a typhoon, and if you've ever been in a typhoon, you know, on board ship, that was quite an experience. Got the word that we were going to Okinawa.
Okinawa was the next major enemy island on the U.S. schedule. An assault force of soldiers and Marines made the invasion on Easter Sunday, 1945.
Our group studied the maps, and we didn't know what to expect. And that was on April 1st, Fool's Day. So we wound up landing at Yantan Airfield. And while we were on the outskirts of the airfield, a Japanese fighter plane landed on the airfield. There's all these American ships out there, battleships, aircraft carriers, and this guy landed on the airfield. He got out of the plane, looked around, and that's the last thing he ever did because they took an awful lot of shots at him. That was it. He never took off in that plane. From then, we went across the island, and we wound up near Shuri Castle. And that's where we stayed for almost the month of April because it was rainy season. There, we were under artillery fire, mortar fire, and sniper shots. We built up a sandbag situation where we could look down on Shuri Castle and check and see the guns coming out of the walls and the caves down there. A lot of gunfire coming. I was walking alongside of a tank, and somebody came up to me and said, "See that up there, there's a 90-millimeter gun firing down on the tanks and on our guys. Talk to the tank guy and tell him that that's where it's happening." On the back, you could lift up, and there was a telephone there, and I talked to the tank guys. And I said, 10 o'clock high, a couple hundred yards away. And they fired a couple times and got the gun. And then after that was over, the rainy season ended, and they got us on board trucks and started south. And going south, I saw some of the most terrible things I ever saw in my life. Thousands of Japanese alongside the road had been shot down by aircraft. That's the first time they could fly. Ships were firing down on them, killed an awful lot of people. It was a terrible sight. But we were under fire there for a couple of days, a heavy fire. The Japanese were not ready to surrender. And finally we got it cleaned up. We came back northern end of the island from the south end, and there we rested for a couple of days, and we had another typhoon hit us and destroyed a lot of tents and so forth, and we saved sailors that were getting shipwrecked out off the bay. We had lined up our trucks and cars up on the cliff, put the headlights down so we could see these people swimming ashore. We were ordered up a hillside, our Easy Company 2nd Battalion that I was attached to, and we were ordered to go up this hillside and take the hill. It was a terrible battle. We never took it. I was at the company CP command post, and the operator on the telephone said, "An officer wants to talk to you." So they gave me the phone, and it was a general. He said, "What's going on?" I described it to him. I said, "We have a lot of casualties. We need stretcher bearers. We need water. We need ammo. We're throwing hand grenades back and forth." I said, "That's how close we are. We can't take the hill." So he thanked me. Later on, we got the word to pull out. So we pulled away from that hill. When I got down to the bottom of the hill, I don't know what happened. The next thing I remember, I don't know, we were hit by an explosion or what. I was in a carrier taking me to the hospital. Somehow or another, I got blown off my feet. They put me in this carrier, took me to a very large hospital tent away from the battles. I didn't know why I was there. I felt all right. So the next day they said, "We're going to give you an examination." I said, "Why?" "See where you're hurt." I said, "I'm not hurt. Take me back to my company, Easy Company, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines." They did. So I went back into battle again. There was a lot of mortar fire on us and bullets flying all over the place. And I ducked behind a couple rocks, and there's a sergeant major of Easy Company lying there. I said, "Are you okay, Sarge?" He said, "Yeah." I could tell he was scared. So I said, "Well, we got to get going." He said, "Oh." I said, "Come on, Sarge." So he got up with me, and we went up the hill together. I lost him there. I carried a Thompson 45 caliber submachine gun. That was my weapon, and a 45 on my hip. When I fired my Thompson, if you were behind it, you could see the 45 caliber bullets go through the air. That's how big they were. I didn't have to aim it. All I had to do was point it. I saw some terrible things. We were behind a railway line. In front of us was this open field, and there was a road to the right, and this railroad track went across the front of us, and it was an elevated one, about a little bit more than head high. And we were behind that. And during the night, we'd always putting star shells up to see what was going on. And we saw coming down the road natives in white robes. And they said, "Let them through." We let them through, and that was a big mistake, because the Japs were hiding in amongst them. And then when they got past us, the Japs went behind us and started throwing grenades and stabbing people with a knife. So that we got the word, no more Okinawan civilians can go down the road. But what are we going to do? Shoot into them. It sounds terrible, doesn't it? But they had to do it because the Japs were in there. That stopped that stuff. That didn't happen. And the next morning there was a kamikaze attack, and they came down after us, and we had a heavy gunfire. Next morning, the Japs were in front of us. All of them were dead. Oh, yeah, we could see them diving on the ships. You could see the ships exploding. They were maybe 20 miles out, but we were up so high in the mountains. You could see it happening. And then we had to be careful because anti-aircraft fire, the shrapnel would be coming our way. So we had to duck, get down on the ground quick.
The Marines mopped up the rugged northern area of Okinawa against sporadic resistance.
When I was in Okinawa, I was blown up 3 times. I was pretty much on my own because of my origin, combat intelligence. So I was gathering information all the time, and at night I would draw a map of our positions and then send it back to battalion headquarters. In case we needed shell fire, they wouldn't fire on us, we'd give them the coordinates. And if we had an airplane strafing, we gave them the coordinates, and if we could, we'd put out markers in front of the lines. I was a pretty busy guy. I'd go out on patrols, but I was blown up 3 times on Okinawa. And this one time I was on this beautiful hill, trees on it, stone boulders on the top of it. And I stood up and I thought, what a beautiful day. We had just finished clearing out an area so we were free of any fire of any kind, especially rifle fire. And I'm sitting there. Next thing you know, I hear this boom, 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 boom. And I look there, and I see this little guy coming up, running up the road towards this hill that I'm in. And he had a Thompson, and he was firing the Thompson into this hill. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what it was. Evidently, it was an ammo cave, or either that or the Japs blew it up, and I was on top of it. I was blown off my feet. Rocks hit me. I wound up laying against a tree, half unconscious. And I thought, what in the world happened to me? Evidently, I didn't realize that I was under this massive amount of explosives. Now, either the Japs blew themselves up in the munitions they had in there, but this little guy didn't know it, but he never made it. Of course, he was killed. One other thing happened to me, too, on the front lines. I was asked to stand guard one night on the front lines. I was given a rifle with a super scope on it, the one you can see in the darkness. And that's the first time we'd ever seen anything like that. So I'm in there with the rest of some other guys in a line, and I thought, well, I put this rifle up to my shoulder, adjusted it, and looked ahead of me, and going across my vision were Japanese. They weren't more than 20 feet away from me, and they were silently going in front of our whole line without we didn't even know it. No, I wouldn't want to fire, because if I did that, they were too close. I didn't do anything. I told Captain about it. He said that was a smart thing to do. Coming home and meeting some of the people in my family, that was a good thing. My mother, of course, had received a telegram in Peleliu that I was wounded. That upset her, and then the rest of my family. But I got home and met up with people, made friends again. I met a young lady one night at the Veterans Fair on North 4th Street in Reading. She was sitting there with her parents, and there was a band playing, and I went over and asked her to dance. And she did. Next thing you know, in a couple of weeks, I made a couple phone calls and got to know her. The only sad part about all of this is I married her on Valentine's Day of 1948, and she died on Christmas Eve of 48. That was the sad part of that. After a couple of years, I remarried and had 3 beautiful daughters. Then I had an awfully good life. I played golf, I played tennis, I skied all over the world in Europe and here in this country. So I've been a very active person, and I've enjoyed my life. I guess the only thing I can say, and I have no idea how I ever reached my 95th, and next Monday, July 31st, I'll be 96. So that's my life.